Good evening. Thank you for joining us for our Eye on Asia Forum 2021. Before we start, please allow us to run through some housekeeping to ensure that everyone can enjoy this session. Once our program starts, you'll be muted with your video function off. Please post your questions using the Q&A function, which we will take during the Q&A segment after the panel discussion. The theme for this year's Eye on Asia Forum is Looking to Asia with a Global Mindset. Our second session today will focus on China and India. We are happy to have Ik Ping Ng and Shobha Chering Bala, who will share their insights on venturing into the region through a panel discussion moderated by Alan Tan. Ik Ping is a seasoned finance and investment professional with close to 20 years of international and China-based experience spanning private equity, strategic M&A, and private wealth management. He currently works at a large financial institution and is a part-time author, mentor, and Enneagram coach. A Terman Scholar at Stanford University in the United States, Ik Ping also teaches finance at Renmin University in Beijing, China. Shobha is a veteran journalist and media entrepreneur with extensive experience as a senior print and online journalist. In 2007, she founded India Say Media, the first magazine media company catering to India diaspora in Singapore and Southeast Asia. Shobha is also on the board of the Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry and is the chairman of SHE at SICCI. Alan Tan has engaged in the Singapore Business Federation's global market development activities in ASEAN, Africa, Middle East, Central Asia, and South Asia for the past 12 years. Prior to joining SBF, he served 2 overseas postings as First Secretary Commercial Center Director in Bangkok and New Delhi, and was also with the Singapore Economic Development Board. Focusing on ASEAN countries, China and India, Eye on Asia is a collaborative effort by the National Library Singapore with partners to provide resources for Singaporeans who wish to find out more about the region and explore internationalization opportunities abroad. Here, we would like to thank and acknowledge our partners who have collaborated with us for today's forum. Launched in November 2007 by founding patron and Singapore's founding Prime Minister, Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, Business China's mission is to nurture an inclusive bilingual and bicultural group of Singaporeans through extensive use of the Chinese language as the medium of communication so as to sustain our multicultural heritage and to develop a cultural and economic bridge linking the world and China. As the Apex Business Chamber of Singapore, Singapore Business Federation plays a critical role in the globalization of Singapore businesses. In November 2019, Global Connect at SBF was initiated to help Singapore businesses expand and deepen into market abroad. Today, SBF has risen to meet the challenges of the fast-changing world economy and business environments with Global Connect at SBF, Learn, Land, and Localize, a full spectrum of overseas business expansion services designed for working hand-in-hand with businesses to grow and scale them strategically into markets abroad. And the Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry is one of the oldest trade associations in Singapore that serves as an advocator, connector, and enabler for businesses to identify networking opportunities to enhance their operations and capabilities locally and globally. As an esteemed institution with 97 years of history, the Chamber offers members and the wider corporate community a diverse range of services to meet their ever-growing business needs through seminars, conferences, forums, training programs, courses, advisory services, and trade missions. I will now pass the session to Alan and our speakers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashif. So our first speaker today is Mr. Ng Ik Ping, who's an engineer turned finance professional based in Greater China. So Mr. Ng's presentation today on China will focus on these topics. How should young Singaporeans gear up to embrace the opportunities presented by China and the rest of Asia? What are the emerging trends and opportunities in a post-pandemic China? Let us now draw valuable inspiration from Ik Ping as he shares his personal story and provides an insider's view into China's transformation through the lens of an overseas Singaporean working in China. All right, Ik Ping, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, for the kind introduction. You guys can hear me, right? Good. Yeah, I'm extremely privileged and I'm very excited to be here today. Thank you to all of you who have taken time off your busy schedules to join Alan, Shoba, and I. I'm very glad to see so many of you dial in for our session today, and I hope to keep our conversation today as casual as we can. So please send in your questions in the chat box so we can address them in the next hour or so. Well, first off, I must profess I'm no China expert. There is this whole academic discipline called sinology that focuses on the study of China, primarily through Chinese philosophy, language, literature, culture, and history. But I guess I've lived in this region over an extended period of time, I guess, to catch some of the nuances of doing businesses here and handling personal relationships. So my story is just one story among many other Singaporeans who have lived and spent substantial time here in China. I actually have some golfing buddies back in Beijing who have been living in China since the 1980s, and I call them my 大哥, and they are really the real generation of pioneers who have gone before me. China is obviously really large, very vast, very diverse, and one story that you hear is just but one story and just one perspective. So with this, I thought it would be helpful for us to set the stage for our discussion today without risking trying to overgeneralize or oversimplify things. I hope to share my little story with all of you. So I took the path less traveled and slightly different from my peers. Most of my peers have chosen to reside or work in Singapore, which is obviously one of the most comfortable and kid-friendly cities in the world. One of my JC classmates has become a pilot with the RSAF. One has become a famous singer and a music teacher. One has taken over his family business. Some of them have taken up senior roles within the government, senior roles within multinational corporates. I'm actually an engineer by training, but the really funny thing is that I actually never done a day of engineering work before. I started off my career in a Temasek Link company in their business development team, and my job was really to assess overseas projects to decide whether my company should acquire them or not. I was actually based in Singapore, but actually spent most of my time traveling and on the plane. And that was when we all could still fly. My China venture actually began about 14 years ago, almost by chance, not by choice. In 2007, I joined a private equity fund that was looking to set up operations in China to invest part of our $600 million US dollars that we had raised. At that time, my boss said, I could speak a bit of Mandarin, so asked me if I was open to relocate from Singapore to Beijing. I took the skills from my previous job into my new role, and I realized that actually doing business in China was a whole new ballgame altogether. At that time, as a blue-eyed Singaporean whose knowledge of China was just limited to the couple of holidays that my parents would take me, who, by the way, they are primary school Chinese teachers, and also the occasional documentaries that I watch on CCTV, on Channel 8. Actually, my family comes from a very traditional Channel 8 family. My parents only speak Mandarin to me at home. Well, at that time, being young, I did not have any family commitments. And of course, going to a new city was obviously a very refreshing thought to me. So, I took it up. Little did I know that actually this will become really a permanent posting and that China was really going to leave such a big impact in my life. When I first started off in Beijing, when I first set foot there, March 2008, the city was getting busy with the hosting of the Summer Olympics. At the same time, amidst the whole celebration, the breaking of world records, the financial crisis hit. And China introduced the 4 trillion renminbi stimulus to weather the shock. And you can see this was a special season in China's modern history, marking its rise as a major economic power. Personally, I was also adapting to the new business and living environment, the weather, the 4 seasons, the harsh winters, the dry summers, the sandstorms, snowstorms, pollution, the new drinking and entertainment culture. I was actually the only foreigner in an all-local Chinese team. All my meetings were conducted in Mandarin. I was writing all my email correspondence all in Mandarin. At that time, I was traveling each week to Beijing on a Monday afternoon and coming back to Singapore on a Friday night. That was kind of refreshing at the start, but the extent that the staff at the SQ counter started to recognize me, I realized that after 6 months of doing so, it became really a it was taking really a big toll on me. So eventually I took up the permanent posting. But that meant that I had to pay 45% income tax to the Chaoyang district government. But I guess the role was sufficiently interesting enough that I got to meet many Chinese entrepreneurs who were looking to set foot on the world stage and to get private equity funding with their eventual goal to IPO their company overseas. So my work actually involved having to assess these deals, to do due diligence on these companies, and eventually to make a decision whether to invest or not invest in them. So some of the interesting experience I had was like drinking Mao Tai, in like at 11 a.m. in the morning, getting into pretty awkward, pretty hilarious situations, having to resolve differences, trying to bridge the cultural gap between my Western bosses and and the Chinese entrepreneurs that we wanted to invest our money into. And all of them had different views of the world. So I'll share some of these later, as well as some of my learnings. So in 2013, I was offered an opportunity to join an investment outfit that was managing family and the investment matters of a few ultra high net worth families, and I was tasked to head up their international division. So the role continued to be based in Beijing, but this began my gradual switch from corporate and investment banking side of things to managing the wealth and the family needs of rich private individuals. And just to set the stage, right? So this really coincided with the explosive growth in the level of personal wealth in the country. Just to give some numbers for a sense check, right? China generates 2 billionaires, US dollar billionaires every week. 1 in 5 billionaires are in China. The latest news, I believe, from Hurun report last week was that in 2020, despite the COVID situation, 1 in every 2 newly minted dollar billionaires were from China. But China creates arguably the most disruptors, the most innovators in this century. And the number of tech unicorns created in Shenzhen, I think, can really match Silicon Valley. And I really had the privilege to meet some of these visionaries and entrepreneurs and to learn a lot from them. So now in 2015, after 7 years in Beijing, I was really looking at my life, reassessing my options, whether I should go back to Singapore, when an opportunity actually knocked on my door to join a company in Hong Kong. And I thought, why not, right? Move 3 hours closer to home. So this is my 6th year in Hong Kong, and I continue to serve Greater China clients out of Hong Kong. So this is my story. I think 2020 was an extraordinary year for everyone. I think COVID really hit us very hard. I think my last trip to China was back in January last year. I was invited by one of our close business partners to attend a large-scale celebration event. At that time, nobody was wearing masks. There was celebration, there was fireworks, but little did I know that that would be one of the last flights that I would take for the rest of the year. And I think for the next 5 years, we will see China really lead on the global stage towards broader post-COVID economic recovery. I think we have gathered at the right time, actually, today, because tomorrow, China will start its annual National People Congress meeting, or the NPC for short, which will discuss and approve, among other things, China's 14th five-year plan. And so we'll cover some of these topics later in the Q&A, but I guess if one is really looking at new investment themes for China, you can see a lot of industries are actually policy-driven. So I would suggest scrutinize the 5-year plan, which can offer clues as to what is the next trend or business opportunity. I think if one were to look at job opportunities, I think the honest truth is that China's job market is really different from 2008 when I first started here. And the competitive advantages of Singaporeans in China is becoming less obvious. But what I would say is that China is very big, right? China is so big. Just let's say if you create a next app, a next app, right, and sell a product or a service to everyone and charge $1 per person, I think you have already created a $1.4 billion business. And I know of many Singaporeans who have actually made their mark in China and still living here. People in the hotel industry, real estate developers, bankers, lawyers, private equity professionals, business owners, from the architectural field, interior design, restaurant owners, pharmaceuticals. You have it, right? So I think China is, there's still a lot of opportunities to explore. So this is all I have. I think due to time constraints, maybe let me pass the time off back to Alan.
Right, thank you, Ek Ping. So our next speaker is Ms. Shobha Sharingbala. Ms. Shobha's presentation today will focus on the following topics. Although India is not a signatory to the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, RCEP or RCEP, its Act East policy is an important part of its Indo-Pacific vision, and ASEAN lies at the core of it. With India's strategic Northeast region set to play a bigger role in connecting the Indian subcontinent with Southeast Asia, enhanced by India's liberalized labor market, how can Singaporeans gain a first-mover advantage in Northeast India? What are some of the possibilities of tie-ups and collaboration between Singapore and Northeast India? Ms. Shobha will also share the cultural similarities between Singapore and Northeast India, as well as how Singapore SMEs with interest in labor-intensive sectors can explore opportunities in India. Ms. Shobha, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me here on this webinar. It's such an honor to be a keynote speaker at what promises to be a compelling discussion on the huge possibilities for Singapore SMEs wishing to do business in India. At the outset, I have to confess I'm not an expert on Indian business. There are far better people than me, but I do come from a business background, having started my own business, a media company in Singapore, focusing on Indians overseas, on NRIs and the Indian diaspora. And I've also been a professional for very many years in Singapore, in several companies, both banks and publishing institutions. I started life as a banker in India. And the reason why a lot of my talk here is going to focus on Northeast India, because very little is known about this region, which is so contiguous to Southeast Asia and so important a part of India's economic strategy. And I come from Northeast India myself, so I guess I have some background and knowledge in which to speak. I grew up in Shillong. I was in school in Meghalaya. My father was working in NIFA of those days, Northeast Frontier Agency, which is now Arunachal Pradesh. And we moved all over Northeast India, all over Assam, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh. And I also lived in, I come from Sikkim actually, originally from Sikkim, living in Darjeeling and all the hill areas of Northeast India. So I hope I'll be able to enlighten you about the wonderful opportunities there are there for SMEs and Singaporeans to do business in India. While India is not a signatory, one of the reasons I always also feel that I should speak on Northeast India is that it's probably the richest in natural resources in India. It is also the closest to Southeast Asia, so it's a natural gateway, and it is an absolutely amazing experience, a mother lode of opportunities waiting for Singaporean SMEs to reap a first mover advantage. There aren't very many FDIs flows into Northeast India, and Japan is the biggest investor, but it leaves a huge chance for Southeast Asian companies, particularly Singapore companies, to rush in and grab this first mover advantage. While India is not a signatory to the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, its Act East policy forms an integral part of its Indo-Pacific vision, which places ASEAN at its core and Singapore at the heart of that core. Since 2014, the Indian government has made the development of the Northeast region a key part of its national strategy. The old Look East policy of the 1990s has been revitalized by a vigorous Act East policy by the current government, its vision writ large on the change of name. This underscores its seriousness about developing Northeast India as the gateway to a deep and lasting engagement with ASEAN and particularly Singapore. In line with this, India has liberalized its labor market, making it as flexible as any other in Asia. Many types of liberalization have occurred, but the key one allows all employers to take on new workers on a fixed term basis, leaving employers the choice of what term to use. This eliminates the need to lay off workers as their employment ends automatically once the contract ends and isn't renewed. Singapore SMEs with interests in labor-intensive sectors like textiles, garments, shoes, toys, food processing, and electronics assembly should explore India opportunities. I'll go more to other industries, especially the ones that are in Northeast India, later. This, coupled with India's production-linked incentives for new industrial units and a corporate tax rate for them of just 17%, make India a very attractive manufacturing site. This will result in a sharp boost to investment spending in India, particularly in manufacturing. In particular, global supply chains now centered in China will be looking for alternative bases, and India is likely to become one of the most attractive destinations for relocating those global value chains, supply chains, at least some of them. Singapore contract manufacturers looking for cheaper production sites with skilled workers will find an ample welcome mat in several states across India. Very importantly, India has also liberalized the agricultural distribution market. The key benefit of this will be to enable farmers to sell directly to retailers, to participate in organized contract farming, to obtain better prices, and to export freely, which they weren't able to do earlier. This will generate wealth in rural India, creating additional demand for basic consumer goods. Singapore companies can seek to capitalize on this explosion of demand and also look to participate in export and internal distribution and logistics in the agricultural supply chain, which is greatly lacking right now. Agri-products are one of the Northeast India's strongest selling points. Tea is a huge industry, and in fact, Assam and Darjeeling and Dwas combined account for 75% of the entire tea exports of the world. Rice, ginger, turmeric, the best turmeric, Lakadong turmeric, comes from Meghalaya. Fruits, vegetables, bamboo being the leading ones. In fact, the production of bamboo in the Northeast is 65% of the whole of India's production, and it's only second to China in bamboo production. Singaporean companies will be able to take advantage of this, emboldened by the Singapore government's strong support of local companies to expand internationally as outlined in its 2021 budget. Why am I focusing on Northeast India and touting it as the most compelling investment proposition for Singaporeans? Well, abundant, almost limitless natural resources for one, proximity to Southeast Asia for another, and strong cultural affinity to the various peoples of Southeast Asia. Northeast India, which covers 8% of India's landmass, is the absolutely natural gateway to Southeast Asia because it's a region whose socio-cultural world has more similarities with the whole of ASEAN than with South Asia. The tribes in Northeast India originate in the ancient movements of people into this region from South China and Southeast Asia and mainland China. The shared palette of colors, patterns, and motifs, even in their textiles, tells us how the rich cultural traditions of the peoples across the larger region of ASEAN and Northeast India have been intricately linked to the political economy at different points in time. Even the food and traditions of the people of Northeast India resemble closely those of tribal communities in Southeast Asia, from Malaysia, Indonesia, Thailand, Philippines, and Taiwan. For example, the Thai Ahom of the Brahmaputra Valley in Assam find many similarities with communities from Thailand, and many other tribals hail from the Tibetan plateau in prehistoric times. The movement of peoples continued well into the late Middle Age. Assam, for example, was ruled for 600 years by the Ahom dynasty, whose kings came from the Shan Plateau in Burma. The Khamtis of Arunachal Pradesh trace their lineage to Thailand, and the Garos of Meghalaya are believed to be of Tibeto-Burman stock. These are just some examples. Another major factor, the connective tissue, so to speak, is that Southeast Asia was under the Indian sphere of influence starting in 300 BC until around the 15th century. This led to the creation of an Indosphere and a Sanskritization of Southeast Asia. You have only to look at the name of our own city-state, Singapore, which is a Sanskrit name. Likewise, Malaya, which means mountains in Sanskrit. So some of the absolutely fantastic possibilities for SMEs and absolutely waiting to be tapped are tourism, because the Northeast has probably the most astounding tourism spots in the whole of India, if not the whole of Asia. Agro-industries, especially now with the new farm laws, and because agro-industry is the biggest industry in Assam, tea inclusive. There's technical education. There's a great shortfall in technical education, nursing, and paramedical training. Northeast India is expected to emerge as an education hub. And there's great ambitions to make it one for Southeast Asia. So many institutions are already building campuses there. So private investment in education is also likely to pick up. And tourism, there is a dearth of good hotels and roads and other tourism destination spots and facilities. So this is where SMEs from Singapore can make the most of. Horticulture and also connectivity. There's going to be a lot of connectivity, and by the end of 2021, the region is expected to be smoothly connected to ASEAN, and it might be possible by 2022 because of the COVID pandemic. It has slowed, the development has slowed, but there's a possibility that people from Assam would be able to drive down to Bangkok in about 48 hours. That is how well connected Northeast India is to Southeast Asia. And if you have questions about how you could go, I think this is the absolute opportune time to go and try businesses and to learn about business in Asia. And if you have questions, I can talk to you about it during the question and answer session, because my time is almost up. By the way, there's also tremendous oil and gas and shale in the Northeast. So for fuel and oil and gas and for solar energy, there's a lot of opportunities as well. With so much synergy in place, Singaporeans and Singapore SMEs should take up this and gain a first mover advantage. For those who are interested in doing business in Asia, may I point you to my chamber, the Singapore Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, which has long years of experience in doing business with India and helping SMEs venture there, more than 97 years. SICKI also has an international business division that serves the globalization needs of local companies and a stable of experienced advisors to help you. I'm humbled and grateful to be a part of this dialogue, and I'd like to thank our wonderful moderator, Mr. Alan Tan, my fellow speaker, Mr. Ik Ping Ing, and the National Library Board for organizing this event. Hope you enjoyed the talk.
Thank you, Ms. Shobha. That was a very inspiring talk on Northeast India. Not many people know about this region. I have several questions here on hand. So the first question basically is on China. Where can one go to find out more about venturing into markets in China? What would be your advice on Singapore citizens who are seeking internship or working opportunities in China? How, where, and who should they look for assistance in this regard? What are the channels available for Singaporeans to integrate with the local environment or community and stay connected to Singapore? I guess this question is for Mr. Ng Ik Ping. Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Alan. Well, so I'll divide the answer maybe into two parts, right? So one is before going, and then one is after you get to China, right? So before going, I think there's a lot of resources, right? So Eye on Asia, tons of good resources, articles, thought leadership content. Business China, I think they have done an extraordinary job at developing a strong cultural and economic bridge linking Singapore, the world, and China. I think National Youth Council has an Asia-ready exposure program. I think this is all about having short-term overseas immersion opportunities for young adults to really gain a more holistic understanding of ASEAN, of China, of India. Niam Poly, I believe, also has a China readiness program offered by the School of Interdisciplinary Studies. So I think these are all a lot of resources. I think in terms of some of the groups that one could join, I think maybe I can mention two over here. One is the OSG Youth Alliance. I think their motto is empowering today's youth for tomorrow's world. I think they have a lot of resources over there. Young Seekers, Seekers as in SEA, right? Seekers. I think their agenda is really to move and to create a new generation of ASEAN and China savvy youth leaders, and really about connecting ASEAN and China youths to better navigate the region. And nothing obviously beats reading a book, right? So National Library Board has a vast array of resources. I think we should be really thankful for such a wonderful library system and a network. I think I have recommended 3 books on China. In particular, a book that was adopted as a compulsory reading material for Niam Poly's China Readiness Program called Young China Hand, which records a Singaporean's fascinating experience handling a business investment in China, which ultimately went terribly wrong. I think the lessons he learned there are worthy to note. And for all of you who are keen to explore working in China, I think this is a great resource as well. So this is before going to China, right? So after going to China, I think there's a couple of things, right? So after going to China, I think really to immerse into the local scene, there are embassy events, Singapore Day, National Day celebrations at the embassy. There's get-together sessions where you get good food, good satay, good popiah, good company. I think also to suggest that everybody gets to become a member of the Singapore Global Network, right? I really like that slogan, to be part of a global family with Singapore at its heart. Again, very important, get to know 1 or 2 mentors, because these are the people that have gone before us, and that I've gotten a lot of mentorship in the past, and I really value these mentorships. There's also WeChat groups. I have quite a few WeChat groups: Singaporeans in Beijing, Singaporeans in Hong Kong, China Watchers Group, Overseas Singaporean Network. There's the Singapore Chamber of Commerce in China as well as the Enterprise Singapore Overseas Center. So please add me on LinkedIn or WeChat or send me an email. I can try and connect all of you to the right people and the resources.
All right, thank you, Ek Ping. Okay, that was a very good explanation, before and after. And all right, we have another question here directed for India. Okay, what are the key challenges or myths about working and living in India? All right. Okay.
Well, for Singaporeans, which is a first world country, I mean, we're not used to the noise, the lack of infrastructure and all that. It could be a little bit of a cultural shock for those who've never been out of Singapore. But if you've been to Thailand and if you've been to considerable travel in Indonesia and other places, there isn't that much of a difference really in terms of infrastructure. But what you're going to find is there's going to be a lot of cultural differences. For instance, even from state to state, there are big differences. So what you have to do is you've got to get to read up on it, contact channels that are available, is to talk to the India offices of ESG, Enterprise Singapore. They have very good offices in Chennai, in Mumbai, and in Delhi. And also to, meet up groups in specific locations that host foreigners. And because India is not homogeneous at all. It is, I could say it's a continent in itself. So you've really got to be prepared to find a great difference in, say, Tamil Nadu, and quite different from Bengal, West Bengal. And then it's quite a different thing in Nagaland or in Sikkim. Sikkim is not seems like another country altogether. But there's some basic strong threads that bind them all. So maybe English is one. Can all speak, everybody speaks some, in businesses, nearly everybody speaks English. And Bazaar Hindi, like Pasar Malay, everybody does that, even in the remote hills of Northeast India. And taxations, you've got to get used to even taxation can differ from state to state. So it isn't a one size fits all for India. Unlike if you went to the United States, you generally are given, there isn't that much disparity between all the states, maybe climatically and all that, but culturally not that different. In India, there is that. But then in the Indian educated people, the higher educated people and those English speaking. And in the urban centers, it's more or less roughly the same. But be prepared for a lot of noise, for not having a very, very sleek infrastructure like here or in very developed countries. But it's great fun. It's a cultural wonderland. Let's put it that way. It's a real cultural wonderland, and missing out on the India experience is a real loss as a young person or a business person. Today, in today's context, India offers you a lot more than most other countries combined.
Thank you so much, Shobha. Yes, indeed, a passage to India is a journey one will never forget. I was there 3 years for 3 years in New Delhi. So
yes, I do.
What you're saying.
In charge of.
Yes, I have another question on both India and China. If there was one thing which you could do better before you ventured into new environments in the region like China and India, what would it be as a learning point for young Singaporeans? So I guess this is more young Singaporean asking. Thank you.
I would really equip myself with knowledge of country knowledge, cultural knowledge, perhaps even a little bit of Pasar Hindi or the language of the state, because nothing wins the heart of the local people that you're going to interact with every day. I don't mean the big officers who'll all speak in English with you. Make no mistake, in India, in every company that you go to, even in shops, in medium shops, and everybody speaks English. It may not be fantastic English, but every understandable English. And in offices and in big businesses, everybody speaks a very high level of English. So you should learn things like you shouldn't make terrible cultural mistakes. For instance, I'll give you one example. In India, whichever religion you may come from, whether you're a Hindu or a non-Hindu, you do not make the mistake of eating from the same plate and putting it in your mouth and serving yourself. It's called the concept of juta, which today is seen as one of the reasons why India didn't suffer terribly when SARS and bird flu and all was on, because nobody uses the utensils they put in their mouth to serve with it. It's taboo in India. So this is one thing you must always remember: a separate serving spoon, separate eating hand. If your hand has food on it, you cannot pick up a serving spoon and serve yourself. And all that stemmed in ancient times from hygiene, actually, which got incorporated into religious practices. But it really has saved India, a huge country of almost 4 billion, from getting awful plagues and diseases that were causing catastrophes on all the countries around the world. It didn't get bird flu was very minimal, so was SARS.
Yes, all right. Yeah. So that was India. So how about your side, Ek-Ting? Any word of advice for young Singaporeans in that space?
Sure. Well, first off, I must say that Singaporeans are very blessed, and probably most of us are used to systematic efficiency back home. But I think China's chaotic order is always an endless source of fascination and frustration. I think one of the lessons I learned is really how to take calculated risks. Because Chinese, I think they are very smart risk takers, and they are relentlessly innovative. I think they are forever seizing new opportunities to make their companies fast-growing, powerful, and flexible. They're always reinventing their business, and I guess in China's unforgiving business climate, I think to stand still is really to risk being disrupted. I think in China, people also work very hard. They're more willing to experiment by trial and error. And by the time other people in the world have come up with a structured plan, I think the Chinese would have already developed a solution. So that's one thing. I think the other advice is really the desire to learn, right? So I teach finance at Renmin University. I think the youths there, the young adults, I think their hunger for new knowledge, their thirst to learn, their proactiveness at trying to outshine their peers and wanting to do something different. I think that is also something which is just always inspires me. The other thing is about language, right? So everybody says in order to really get into the culture, you really have to master the language. So I think mastering Mandarin was obviously a very good decision for me as a kid when my parents brought me up. And now that I'm a father, I think there's an informal arrangement with my wife that says she will be Channel 5 to our kids, and I'll be Channel 8, right? So that's very important as well.
Thank you, Ek Ping. All right, we have another question from the audience. It's also on China again. So what's the business outlook in China post-COVID-19? What are the new investment and emerging job opportunities that Singaporeans can look forward to? And how is digitalization changing China today?
Okay, this is a long question, but I'll try.
Yeah, three questions actually. Yeah.
Split it up into a couple of key thoughts. I think first off, I like to say China continues to amaze me up to today. China lifted the most people out of poverty than any other country in the world, right? So in the 1970s, we're looking at China's per capita GDP at lower than 2/3 of the African average, less than half of the Asian average. But now in urban cities, you see that poverty is virtually eliminated, right? China also invests more each year in renewable power than any other country in the world, right? China has the largest generator of solar power. China has the world's largest high-speed railway network. China wants to build the world's tallest building in 90 days, 90. And I believe there was a 57-story building that was built in 19 days, 19. China's, let me think, Singles Day, right? That's another thing. This is an anti-Valentine's Day joke, right? $1 billion of orders placed in the first few minutes. And last year, despite COVID, we were looking at $75 billion sales just on the Alibaba platform alone. And this is despite COVID, right? 20% of GDP, of Singapore's GDP. So China really is first in and out of the COVID crisis. There is a lot of pent-up demand, especially consumer demand from the robust middle-class population. You probably read in the news, right, that over 600 million people traveled during the Golden Week holiday alone last year, generating almost $70 billion of tourism dollars in just 1 week. So there's a revival of domestic travel, intra-regional tourism. There is also evidence to show a broadening recovery of retail, manufacturing PMI. I think 2021, as I mentioned earlier, is a special year for China because it's the start of the 14th five-year plan. And the key aspect of this five-year plan is really about Beijing's dual circulation strategy, which focuses really on quality as well as sustainable growth and to encourage domestic consumption, cut reliance on overseas markets and technology. And this time, really, China will be focused on quality growth, innovation, technological upgrade, structural reform, financial market liberalization, digital transformation, and further market opening. One other theme in China is really the Greater Bay Area. I think this was announced in the previous five-year plan, the 13th five-year plan. This is, a region that, I now reside in. I'm based currently in Hong Kong. The Greater Bay Area is about 9 mega cities all coming together in Guangdong, together with the 2 SARs, which is the Hong Kong and Macau. More than 70 million people residing in this area. This Greater Bay Area concept is starting to bear fruit. I think there's also the Wealth Management Connect that's coming up. China's has another big theme, which is about carbon neutrality by 2060. Electrical, so we're looking at electric vehicles, we're looking at renewable energy, really going to power China's green revolution. So there's a lot of things. We talk about e-commerce, digital payment, food delivery, online entertainment, etc., etc. I think that there are a lot of industries that would be supported by the strong policy support from the central government. So these are some of the things that I can think of at this moment. Yep.
Thank you, Ek Ping. Well, I have actually another question, a very practical question in regards to China. Okay. Do you see a growing need for translators and interpreters as more businesses seek opportunities in China? Do you think multicultural bilingual professionals have an edge in this aspect in China?
Yeah, I think the short answer to the question is a definite yes. I think translators, especially those translators that do it live, that means you hear something from the left ear and then immediately it needs to come out. The live translators are just amazing. I think they have I have worked with a couple of them because we, in my company, we actually run quite a few large scale events prior to the pandemic, and we always have to engage these simultaneous translators, and they do an excellent job. So translation capabilities is well regarded, and in fact pretty well paid in China. So to the extent that any of you are interested in that, I think this is definitely, it's about linguistics as well, right? It's about also a love for language, and that is very important, because if some people just don't like to do language related stuff, but if somebody is keen, I think this is definitely a growing industry as well. The second question was on bilingualism, right? So I think I think as Singaporeans, we really benefited from the bilingual policy, and that I think the very reason why I was able to survive in China was really my bilingual upbringing, right? And I remember when I was back in Beijing, when I had to attend board meetings with my Western bosses, who was talking to a Chinese entrepreneur, and obviously we're looking at there's a difficulty in communication, right? And obviously the nuances of words, you sometimes when you translate, you need to make sure that you translate it in a better way, or so that it doesn't, the other party does not mistake what you say. So I think this is an art, really. It's not a science, it's an art. So being able to learn the intricacies of doing translation is really a great skill to have. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Ek Ping. All right, this question is directed for India to Ms. Shobha. Is there a book, website, or resource you would recommend a new person to be armed with regards to the India market?
I can't think of one particular book that has everything in it, but I have recommended some books for a totally new person to India to read before they venture out, and even for just private personal knowledge. It's very, very interesting. I think I've recommended at least 4 books, although I actually have a list of at least 20. And if one of them, 2 of them are actually related to Southeast Asia, but it's more historical and cultural. And they're by Sanjeev Sanyal, an economist with Deutsche Bank earlier. And now he wrote these while he was living in Singapore, as a matter of fact, and working here. And he's now the principal economic advisor to the government of India. And he's written it from a very readable, very intelligent, and a fresh point of view, actually traveling to all the places in Southeast Asia, which was culturally colonized by the ancient Chola kingdoms and the other kingdoms from the 300 BC till the 15th century, all over Southeast Asia, right up to the Champa kingdom in Vietnam, Borobudur, and all the well-known ones. But for something about in order to actually get an idea of how India operates, because it's very hard to put a finger on India. India is a vast, teeming democracy, and it's got so many different cultures, and the way they perform, even that taxations are different. So you can't say this is how it works in India at all. And therefore, you should actually read a book by Gurcharan Das, and it's called India Grows at Night. You could say subtext at that time when he wrote it was while the government sleeps. I don't mean to be irreverent, but I don't think it refers to the current government at all, because they've been far more aggressive in developing the Northeast and developing the economy of India. That's because they also have a very strong mandate in politics. So they're able to push through many laws. So I think that book would be great, by Gurcharan Das, When India Sleeps, India Grows at Night. Do read that. It's in the library, in the National Library. There's Ocean of Churn and Indian Renaissance. I understand that both these books are now being subscribed for schools and high schools in India. It's excellent reading, very simply written. And it gives you a wonderful perspective and a broad perspective on India and its relationship to Southeast Asia. Then there's the book, The Argumentative Indian by the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen. These are like essays. Read that too. It gives you an insight into how Indians, as a rule, how the democracy in India works or doesn't work sometimes. It's chaotic, but it works. It's thriving, and it's an actually thriving and booming democracy. Nothing can shut down that democracy, no matter what media and all say. And the government could come up with some laws, but there'll always be some political party and pressure groups who'll go against it. So that's one of the reasons also which has slowed down development in India, because you can't just go ride roughshod and say, we'll raise these villages and we'll build factories here. You can't do that. There's human rights. There's political rights people have, personal rights. There are land laws. It's absolutely impossible to do that. So the government has to tread warily when it does that. It has to also satisfy, people's desires, and human rights is a very important thing. So lots of the time you find people poking their fingers and pointing their fingers at the Indian government, but they're being held to a very high standard, higher standard than many other countries in the region. The Indian government, and they have always been held just because they're a practicing democracy. So people expect much more from them. Anyway, to talk about, may I just tell you, I had forgotten to mention that Northeast India, Sikkim, the state where I originally come from, I'm a Singaporean now, proud Singaporean. Sikkim is the only officially organic state in the whole of Asia. All the fruits and vegetables are organic there. And no single-use plastic is allowed. Completely banned single-use plastic. So you have that. And you also have the cleanest village in Meghalaya, which has been, so it's a very clean and pure environment you're talking about in Northeast India. And that people are looking at sustainable energy, sustainable businesses. So I think it will appeal to SMEs, to modern thinking young professionals and businesses who are also concerned about the environment.
Yes, thank you, Shobha. And of course, you can find all these books in the National Library in Singapore, right? Okay.
Yes.
India and China.
It's probably one of the best libraries I've ever been to. I really think they have a vast store of great books. And
I agree with you, Shobha.
Thank you, Shobha. Okay, so I have another question from Mr. Wei Tan or Ms. Wei Tan. I always find my India partners overpromise and underdeliver. What are some good ways to manage this? I guess this for you, Shobha.
Don't over-expect and lower your expectations. And I only say this not because of a lack of talent and a lack of skills. They have tremendous talent and skills. It's the system. There still is quite a bit of red tapeism. There's bureaucracy, there's laws and loopholes that they have to go through. I think that is the main obstacle. But I think the government is now trying to sort of lessen those loopholes that were there from what used to be called the license Raj during the independence up to the 70s and 80s. I think from the 1990s, it started getting a little bit loosened, but there's still room for improvement. So I understand, because Singapore is so efficient. What you want today is done yesterday. In India, you have to be patient. You have to.
Thank you, Shobha. I have another question from Mr. Jeffrey Ong. I think it's a very good question. Dear Ek Ping and Shobha, in your opinion, what is the competitive and comparative advantage a Singapore SME has in China and India as compared with, let's say, Thailand, Malaysia, and Indonesia?
Can I answer that?
Yes, please.
You're talking about competitive advantage that SMEs that are Singapore born have in India. Well, let me tell you, the brand Singapore. It is such a potent brand. It's unbelievable. You go to small villages in the hills in Northeast India. You go to any small town and you say Singapore. They use Singapore as a synonym for perfection. I don't know why. It's like, you know, you even have it in Bollywood movies. We've seen it in the 1960s movies where Singapore was an attractive, cute destination. And today when you say Singapore, you don't hear this is made in Texas or this is made in UK. You just hear, if you say Singapore, you know you're getting something really good. For example, my home state, my original birth state, Sikkim, the whole town, the capital city, Gangtok, was re-architectured by the Urban Redevelopment Authority, because that was what the then Prime Minister, Mr. Chamling, felt that the best people to do so would be the URA, and they did it. They did a very good job of it. And people use that and use Gangtok and Sikkim as a perfect little town, as an example and a role model for other cities in Northeast India. In fact, the rest of India.
Thank you for the very interesting snippet of information. What about you, Ek Ping? Any views on this?
Yeah, I think I can't complete a talk about China without talking about trust, right? Or guanxi, which is the relationship angle, right? So I think trust factor is really essential. I think it's the most important and harder ingredient in achieving business success in China. And if the Chinese really trust you and believe you are of value to them, I think many problems, simply resolve themselves. So I know of, many Singaporeans, who have, worked in China, and not just because they are China savvy or street smart, but really their reputation for integrity and competence. So these are the exact Singaporean traits, and I mirror what Shobha has mentioned. These are the Singaporean traits that, like the ability to systematically plan and to execute strategies, able to deliver, what they promise, really make them highly valued in China. So, some of these same traits, like being stable, law-abiding, trustworthy, and honest, can actually work in Singaporeans' favor. And if you really go to the second, third tier cities, everybody would have heard about our late Lee Kuan Yew. Everybody will have heard about Singapore, about how we managed to develop to become a developed nation since 1965 until now. So I think the branding of Singapore is already there within China. It's all about us trying to capture the right opportunities and to leverage upon our strengths to deliver upon business targets in China.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I think we probably can have time for one more question. Okay, I have one more question from one particular gentleman. In 1 to 2 sentences, what advice would you give to young Singaporeans on the importance of developing global mindsets and be more culturally intelligent or culturally savvy? All right, for both India and China, yes.
Well, I'd say to develop a global mindset, you have to have an open mind. You have to educate yourself, read a lot, and be open to the idea that what others are doing might be better ways than yours, and learn from them. And you have to be very sensitive, culturally sensitive, because, word gets around everywhere due to social media, news, and you cannot say you live under a rock or in a bubble and you didn't know what's going on in this country and that country. So even to do good business, you have to have good cultural references, good cultural understanding. And that is very important for a global mindset. You cannot be dyed in the wool in your attitude. You have to read a lot, open your mind, and be culturally sensitive.
Yeah, I think for me, what I would say is that the world is a playground, for us, and the region has so many opportunities to further one's own skill set. I think it's really important to develop a global mindset, to be able to explore new opportunities that come your way, to be able to go out of your comfort zone, to step into what could be challenging issues. You only grow. I think I read somewhere that one really good quote, which is the best teacher for anybody is failure, right? Failure is your best teacher.
Yes.
So only when you fail, then can you know this is not the right route to take, and that you can then, go and try another way to get things done. I think I've also always been asked this question, right? What are the, few important factors for Singaporeans to really succeed in China? Because being street smart in China is not really something inherent in Singaporeans. It's really about how much, the function of how much discernment you have developed about people, about situations in China, and I'm sure also for India as well, right?
Yes.
So being flexible, ready to handle challenges, being proactive, persistent, in spite of uncertainty, of gray areas, not giving up because the other party says no for the first time, and really about maintaining a proactive attitude at figuring out new and different ways to achieve what you have set up to do, even though doors may seem closed. So I think this really the final advice I would say, really stick it out here for those who are willing to come and venture and join me and venture into China, stick it out here long enough and to learn from the inevitable hard knocks, because it's all about the staying power. It's all about getting your hands dirty and to venture into unknown, knowing that success is never guaranteed.
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. I think we have taken the last question. Thank you, Ms. Shobha. Thank you, Ik Ping, for the wonderful insights on India and also China. All right, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much,
Alan. Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Well, thank you, Ik Ping, Shobha, and your insightful sharing, and to Alan for moderating the discussion. We truly appreciate the time you have taken today to share your first-hand experiences and useful information with us. We hope that everyone enjoyed the session and gained a deeper understanding of Asia. And for those who wish to find out more about Asia after this event, please feel free to reach to our partners listed here. And before we end the session, can we invite you to scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the chat to the online survey form to help us improve our future programs. Well, with that, thank you everyone for your participation today. We have come to the end of the program, and the next Eye on Asia webinar will be in May, so do look out for it. Have a very good evening. Goodbye.